Hello everyone, welcome to Bald Guy Money. As it stands today, Americans' emergency funds are depleted. 88% of Americans don't have enough money to cover the average monthly expenses of a family of four, which is $7,095. 77% don't have enough money to cover the monthly expenses of a single American, which is $3,189. In fact, and sadly so, 37% of Americans can't even afford a $400 emergency. And I share these stats with you all on the backdrop of a story from just this week reporting that credit card debt in the USA has hit a whopping $1 trillion for the first time. So, not only is the country itself broke, with debt to GDP now higher than it was after fighting the Second World War, but the people are also broke, living paycheck to paycheck. And by the way, this applies to basically every country around the world too. Easy money isn't a problem that lives exclusively in the USA. So the purpose of this video and what we're going to cover is really preparing for the ultimate emergency. A moment in time where the value of the cash you've set aside has been either eaten up totally by inflation or has become worthless because people don't recognize it anymore. They won't accept it. And how we're going to address it is by first talking about how much gold and silver you need in each US state to be prepared for an emergency. And yes, it varies from state to state. And finally, I want to cover another way to hedge yourself against your native fiat currency for those expecting metals to boom in the next 3 years, and this is building on the topic of the GDXJ that so many of you asked me to dig into. So, to begin, I want to first cover the methodology that I used so you all understand how we get to the per state results when I reveal them in a moment. And the reason I think it's important to review this is because in the past, I've focused on national household averages, regardless of how many people you're personally responsible for, and without factoring in where you live exactly. So to remedy that, the first change I made this time around was to split the numbers to show the average monthly cost of living for a single person versus the cost for a family of four. And you can see those numbers on the US national level right here. But when it comes to national averages, especially for a country as large as the United States of America is, what we tend to see are major discrepancies. We see people who say, whoa, that's way too much for where I live. I don't actually need that much. And on the flip side of that coin, you have people who are saying they're paying $5,000 a month in rent, and the number I've given is not enough considering the circumstances in the state they live in. So to remedy that discrepancy and give all of my American viewers a proper sense of how much gold and silver I would prepare myself with as a minimum in each state as a single person or the head of a family of four people, I consulted the US Cost of Living Index to calculate each state's emergency fund and then translated that number into gold and silver holdings. And just so everybody is clear on how that works, the base is 100 in the index. That is the average and what the numbers here are based on. So if you're in a place where the index is, for example, 50, then you can see your cost of living is half of what the national average is because 50 is half of 100. And if you're indexed at 200, which is double 100, then your cost of living is twice the national average. Now, the final piece of the puzzle before I reveal the results are to establish what is the proper emergency fund and what kind of silver to gold ratio I'm assuming. On those points, I haven't reinvented the wheel. For the purpose of the video, we are talking about an emergency fund to cover 3 months of expenses at an 80% gold to 20% silver split based on their current spot price. And as I explained in depth in my video on how much gold and silver you need to retire, the reason I have structured it this way is because when preparing for an emergency, you do not want to have too much exposure to silver, which is more volatile than gold. You still want it, and although you may plan your overall stack goals differently, having maybe a little more silver to gold, when it comes to an emergency fund, this is how I would personally split it. So now that we have all that established, let's get into the numbers. And we're going to go in alphabetical order here. And I'm not going to read off each state, but what I want to bring your attention to is how I've structured the data. Starting with the adjusted monthly cost of living per state covered for a single person as well as a family of 4 in these 2 columns. Once we know those numbers, I multiply the number by 3 to give you the 3-month emergency fund measured in US dollars as it stands today. And that is in these columns here. Then, based on the 80% coverage in gold and 20% coverage in silver split, you have the amount in troy ounces a single person needs to cover themselves right here, and what a family of 4 needs to cover themselves right here. So, for example, if you're watching from Alabama, hello everybody in Alabama, that is one of the most affordable states when it comes to the cost of living. A single person there would need about 3.5 ounces of gold and 75 ounces of silver to have what I would call a solid metals emergency fund. Safe from inflation and bank failure shenanigans. And for a family of 4, that number goes up to nearly 8 ounces of gold and 167 ounces of silver. Now, what you can do is you can contrast that versus the most expensive state in the Union, which is Hawaii, where a single person needs almost as much as a family of 4 in Alabama to cover their 3-month cost of living with a metals emergency fund. Now, if your state is covered here on the screen right now, take a moment right now to screenshot this for future reference. Because depending on how you plan your stacking goals, I think for many of you out there, this data is going to come in handy somewhere down the line. Moving on to the next 25 states, you can see those figures here, and I know I have a lot of viewers in Texas. Hello everyone in Texas. I was impressed to see how reasonable the cost of living is there. If you're single, your emergency fund there can be covered by a modest 3.5 ounces of gold and 79 ounces of silver. Much more reasonable than what it takes in California, for example, but I suppose that's why so many Californians are now choosing to move to Texas. Now, I'll give you all a moment to screenshot this too, but I want to say that no matter where you live, I hope you now realize just how unprepared most US citizens are. Because unless you plan on dying tomorrow, having an emergency fund is crucial. But having an emergency metals fund is one thing. Exploring investments related to growing wealth for those of us who plan on living well past tomorrow is another thing altogether. And many of you will remember from a few weeks back that I did a segment on the GDXJ where I said, when metals boom, some of those stocks in the GDXJ will also do very well and yield some huge returns if you can pick the right ones. And the fact is, if the price of gold doubles, some of these stocks can increase in price by 5 times or more. And this is where I want to introduce the sponsor for this video, Gold Mining Inc., which can be found on the New York Stock Exchange under the GLDG ticker. And what I want to say about this company is, although it's impossible to predict the future, the math, which is the foundation of this channel, tells a very interesting story about GDLG for those of you looking for a junior miner with some serious potential. So what am I referring to? To start, the stock, like many other mining stocks, has been beaten down. And that's simply because there is a serious underinvestment in the mining sector happening right now. As of today, the stock is trading for about 89 cents a share with a market cap of less than $160 million. And more on that in a second. But what I want to highlight from this starting place, because I always start from TradingView, is the analyst consensus on this stock is a strong buy, with an average price target, as you can see here, of $3.19 a share, which is a 3.5x from where we sit today. With some analysts saying this stock can reach as high as $5.25 per share, as you can see here in this report, which would be almost a 6x from where we are today. Meaning if you bought $100 worth of shares and we reach this price, you would have $600. But the math that really got me and why I wanted to feature GLDG, Gold Mining Inc., on the channel was their assets versus valuation. And although I don't know the analysts setting the targets that we saw a moment ago, a quick glance at these numbers tells me there is major potential here. And the reason is because, as of today, the company holds 22 million equivalent gold ounces, which are valued by the industry at about $30 to $40 per equivalent ounce. Now, if we extrapolate those numbers to figure out what would be a fair valuation of the company based on those numbers, as you can see here, you're looking at anywhere from $660 million to $880 million, and that's versus their current market cap of about $155 million, and means they could do a 4.3x from here if they reach that minimum valuation level based on the $30 per equivalent ounce calculation. On top of that, they also own shares in some other gold companies. A royalty company they receive cash dividends from worth $36 million, and an 80% stake in an Alaskan gold company worth $112 million. Which means if you just add those numbers alone up, 95% of their market cap is already justified just by the shares they have in these other gold companies. Now, apart from just the math, you all know that I also look at who the other investors are before I jump in. And the last point that motivated me not only to cooperate with Gold Mining Inc. on this video, but also add a little of their stock to my own personal portfolio, at my own cost by the way, is that on the list of top institutional investors, I saw names like Van Eck Associates, Citadel Advisors, the Royal Bank of Canada, TD Bank, and Morgan Stanley. And what that tells me is that funds run by these companies have also taken a bite on the chance that they benefit from a run-up in gold that would add jet fuel to the performance of stocks like Gold Mining Inc., which again has the ticker symbol GLDG on the New York Stock Exchange. And for those reasons, I legitimately see some value in this stock, and I will be DCAing, so doing a dollar cost average strategy into this stock over the next 3 months. And for those of you who are curious to know more, do some research before pulling the trigger. Check them out at goldmining.com. Look them up under their ticker symbol, which is, as I said, GLDG on the New York Stock Exchange, and feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions you want answered via their website. Now, no matter how you choose to prepare yourself, whether it's a stack of gold, a stack of only silver, a mix of both, or some stocks on top of it, the message in this video is for you all to prepare yourselves for the future somehow. And because I know my viewers have different preferences with respect to how they stack, I have made this file, the file that I showed you in this video, available on my Patreon, with the option of changing the split between gold and silver for those of you who prefer to stack, for example, more silver versus gold. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, especially considering the fact that silver is so cheap right now. I understand that, and if you want to see what that looks like in your state, again, feel free to join the Patreon to get access to the file. Before I wrap up, I want to say to those of you living outside of the United States who are curious how much gold and silver you need for your emergency fund, I want to say, don't worry. Another video is coming very soon where I will compare the USA Emergency Fund to that needed in Canada, the UK, Australia, Germany, and India, because I want to show some love to my viewers in India too. Thank you all for watching. That said, that international data is also available right now on the Patreon. But as I said before, I will be dropping a follow-up video to this shortly to show you all how these countries compare to each other, so look out for that coming very soon. With that said, that's it for this video. I'm wishing you all a fantastic day ahead. Please let me know what you thought of the content in the comments below. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Goodbye.